We're going to go to the phones. Todd in California. Aloha, Todd. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Thank you for taking my call. As usual, you're hot on the topics. Hey, I got a question. It would be interesting to note that of the 90-plus that signed off on that senatorial bill or whatever it was that said that the military can just make you vanish basically off the streets, if the people of each one of those prospective states, how they feel about their congressman or whoever it is that signed off on that bill and what they're going to do about whether or not they want to keep that Benedict Arnold in office or not.
Well, I'm sure
it's very. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure that all of these senators are basically going to use the same excuse. I didn't like that provision, but I had to vote for this thing because our armed forces need the money, and there are a lot of lonely sheep around Capitol Hill or whatever else they're going to say about that particular provision. And they're going to say, you know, it's bundled, lesser of two evils. I don't approve of that provision. I thought Obama was going to veto it. So they'll duck responsibility for it that way. We don't need to get into the nitpicking, nuts and bolts, individual line of particular legislation. As you prepare to go to the primaries in the coming weeks, you know, we're just 3-4 weeks away from Iowa and New Hampshire. Just ask yourself, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And if the answer is no, vote out all the incumbents, period, end of discussion. That's all you need to know. And the only other advice I would add to that is if they're up there standing and screaming about what a friend they are to Israel, then they're no friend to America, and they can't get your vote. It's time that we, the American people, take back America by kicking out all these Israel firsters.
I have to beg to differ nowadays. I have to say, well, there is a difference between Zionism and the Hebrew people, and Zionism is basically the upper 1% of the Hebrew people. They really don't care about the Hebrew people at all as well.
Well, they're not Hebrew. They're Ashkenazi, which are descended from Central Asian Khazars. Yeah. And, they're basically great at telling a story about why they should get whatever it is they're going to get, whether they're a victim, they've been cheated, they're this, they're that. And it's just a constant line of bovine excrement that they've been pouring forth for thousands of years. And one of the reasons they hate the Internet right now is that people are starting to stand up and say, we have been lied to enough. And it's time to let this stuff go.
Absolutely, but I still think it would be very interesting to keep a track of all those 90-plus guys that voted a certain way, or men and women, actually, and to kind of graph it out, see how many stay in office, and see how many lose their seat. I bet you it's going to be a majority are going to end up losing their seat.
Only in the states where there's good poll watching and they can keep the vote fraud from happening, because when you see our politicians davening to Tel Aviv as hard as they do and not really caring what it looks like to the American people, that's basically telling us they believe the fix is already in. They believe that the voting machines are going to re-anoint them to power and position as long as they do what their masters in Tel Aviv tell them to do.
I agree. That is a fact. And I am very worried about all this. I think we're ramping up for WW3, to be quite honest. And
we're already there.
I think our time is... Yes. I've told my kids and my wife, and I said, don't be surprised if we see a nuke go off in our time.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
More every day, I think that's a strong possibility. Just like you said, we have too many psychos that run the world. They have no reality of what's going on around them. If you just look at them, all their faces are just devoid of humanity, and it's sad.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to watch these next couple years to watch what these senators have done and what their forward positions are going to be from this point on after they've attached their name to such a hideous piece of excrement on paper. And I do hope the people of those good states decide to make the talking points of what these creatures are about. And I no longer consider them vanity when they sign their name to something like that.
I'd like to leave you with one thought about that, because as we remember this particular piece of legislation, you need to remember this is part of this whole Zionification of the United States of America. They're basically trying to turn us into a new version of Israel, because if you think about all those Palestinian prisoners who have been detained without trial, Those are military detentions, supposedly for the national security of Israel. And these Palestinians are just grabbed off the streets by the military, and they're locked away. Many of them are tortured to try and force confessions out of them that Israel can use to justify these tactics. But we're rapidly being turned into a larger version of Israel West. And you and I and everybody listening to the show, we're on the wrong side of that wall they're going to put up. And, of course, you know, Israel's always had the benefit of the United States of America going in and saying, yeah, whatever Israel wants, Israel's going to get it. The United Nations on the battlefield. You know, massive poverty in the United States of America, and our government is still giving weapons to Israel. And it's absolutely insane. The government of the United States of America is totally about serving Israel, and they don't care, as you said, they don't care about the American people at all. I guess Newt Gingrich thinks we're all imaginary, so it doesn't really matter. But it's absolutely true. Political power attracts the very sort of people who shouldn't be allowed to have it. There's a high degree of sociopathy out there, and a lot of them are caught up in their religious delusions that these are the end times, and if they help Israel set fire to the world, that Jesus is going to come down and invite them up to heaven. And the rest of them are simply blackmailed or bought or somehow or other compromised by their personal lifestyles. I find it very alarming that as soon as somebody gets to Congress, the first thing they do is get a free trip to Israel, and as soon as they come back, you know, Israel can do no wrong. They're always voting Israel, whatever. I don't know. Maybe they get them drunk and videotape them with a goat or something. Maybe that's why they're trying to make bestiality legal in this new bill, because they've all been compromised by Israel or something. I don't know. It's just completely insane out there. But there's no question, with precious few exceptions like Cynthia McKinney and Ron Paul, our government is totally compromised by Israel. I mean, Newt Gingrich out there screaming the Palestinians are imaginary people. They don't exist because they were part of the Ottoman Empire. And that applies to Israel. And the same justification he says for saying that Palestinians are imaginary also applies to Americans. He's not even self-consistent with his delusions. He's simply out there saying whatever he's paid to say. And he gets paid a lot. What, $60,000 a speech? You know, I had to pay out of my own pocket to do my last speech. So, anyway. Todd, anything else for you?
Well, I think that America needs to be very fearful of Newt Gingrich. I think that, you know, with his attachments to, like, Bohemian Grove and other such nefarious groups, I think that we should be very, very leery of this man and his power-hungry grab for the presidency. And I think that he may end up being the next one if we are not careful.
Well, I don't think we should be afraid of Newt Gingrich. I think we ought to be angry. We have spent too much time being afraid, and being afraid is what the federal government wants us to be. That's why they passed this detentions bill. That's why they're trying to bluff us about FEMA camps. They want us to be afraid. I don't want to be afraid anymore. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm burned out on being afraid. I am angry, and so should you be. It's like that wonderful line from Network. Howard Beale gets out there and says, I don't know the answers to fix this thing yet, but I do know that before anything else, you have got to get angry. We have the capacity to feel rage for a reason. We evolved to feel anger and rage for a reason. It is a survival skill, and it's time to get back to that.
I agree with you. Well, you have a good evening, and I hope we have a good rest of the week with you, Mike. You have a good evening, all right?
All right, thanks an awful lot. Thank you for the phone call. All righty, we are just about at the end of the show today, and I do want to wrap up on this situation. Technically, we're already in World War III. The U.S. is invading countries, I think 10 right now, 10 different wars going on 2 different continents under U.S. military doctrine. That is technically a world war. But if the U.S. goes into Iran and we get involved in Russia and China, then the mushrooms will start sprouting. Although, according to Press TV, the United States has already been using small tactical nukes.